Welcome to XXIM YouTube channel. In this video, Ankit sat down with Tarik from OctaSpace to discuss their proof-of-work L1 blockchain with fair launch and their plans to bring OctaSpace over to Kaspa.
We're the eBay or the Airbnb of compute. You have users who demand compute power, and you have people who have nodes with compute power. We bring those two together.
OctaSpace is similar to Bittensor, Render, and Akash network, building decentralized physical infrastructure networks. These projects leverage decentralized blockchain to provide cost-effective GPU compute, 3D rendering, and VPN.
We do everything that Render can do. We do everything that Akash can do. We even do what Bittensor can do. We have NVIDIA, we support NVIDIA GPUs, AMD GPUs, and even Intel GPUs. That's how diverse our architecture is.
The DePIN crypto market is valued at $30 billion in 2025, with projections to reach $631 billion by 2028.
Now, our rendering platform, for example, is being used by various VFX studios. They've created works for even like Coca-Cola, BMW.
OctaSpace has found itself in this unique scenario whereby their mining emission rewards will run out in 2027. So they are thinking of bringing all this distributed computational superpower over to Kaspa.
Imagine if we could bring all this computing power. This would be a special level of utility for Kaspa.
Welcome to XXIM Podcast, your home of decentralization. Today I'm here with Tarik from OctaSpace. You'll be the first DePIN on XXIM. How do you define Octa to someone who's never heard of Octa?
Well, first of all, it's exciting to be the first ones on your podcast. That's
indeed,
really cool.
Indeed.
So I appreciate that. How do we define Octa? The best way I could put it is define it as a kind of Swiss Army knife of computing. I think that's the best analogy I can use. Where we have a wealth of services and something I think I would say we are as unique as you can get in the entire space, both Web 2 and Web 3. And I know that sounds like a bold claim, but I pretty much stand by it.
Okay, I think you can correct me, but the way I understood it, right? Octa is a layer 1, building application using decentralized distributed computing, right? So a handful of words there. That's how I understood it, and probably the even further easier way to define it is with the applications you guys provide on top of this decentralized distributed computing, right?
Yes. I mean, I can go, if you want me to, I can do a bit of a explanation, kind of deep, the overarching view, and just kind of cover some of these aspects and what we're trying to solve.
So why don't we actually get into what problem you're actually trying to solve? Because we sort of answered in complicated words, but why don't you actually simplify it for us with the problem statement?
Right. So the problem statement isn't short, but I'll try and keep it as concise as possible. So look, in the computing space, there are multiple aspects that you need to focus on. So the initial question, we need to understand the current market layout of computing. So, but we're not just focusing on Web 3. Just look at the kind of lay of the land of computing markets. So as a lot of people know, right, computing resources are currently on the rise in terms of usage. A lot of that's obviously fueled by AI, but people forget that computing is used for a variety of tasks. And obviously it's growing continuously. You can, anything from AI to mining, to rendering, to, general compute, for example, processing data, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a real wealth of areas that are covered. And even within specific market segments, so even like, let's say AI, you have more refined segments. So you have biotech, the DNA analysis, yada, yada, yada. So really, it's a little bit of a difficult thing to explain when you're looking at, and when people look at computing, they just think, AI or something like that, right? So as I said, it gets more granular. So when you're looking at that aspect, is one of the key issues in terms of current market supply or market layout is that providers are centralized, first of all. So they control the hardware, right? It's all centralized in one place. Each provider has specific areas they focus on as well. So when we're going into that AI, and some of them even granular, they focus on one specific key area. So I'm going to provide services for this. So I'm going to provide services for that. There are some that do kind of divest in terms of additional kind of small areas, but they are generally within the same, specific category. And then the third issue that you often also have is that technical knowledge of actually being able to use that. And that's also, so when you kind of sum up all those three aspects, you then reach a kind of a conclusion that computing is pretty much out of reach for a lot of people. There's technical limitations and it's just broadly expensive. There's a monopoly. Now, what we need to approach to solve is all those three questions. So if you think about how Kaspa tries to solve the trilemma, we have this trilemma.
Right.
And we are focusing on, so what we've done is we've built platforms that our platform, our technology stack enables us to do everything. And I'll get to that in a bit later, but we have built something that's so bespoke that we can address multiple market segments while using the same architecture behind it. And it's something so unique, but it's entirely decentralized. And so, I could go into multiple areas of limitations in current Web 2, Web 3, what are the solutions? Look, I'll give you an example. A lot of providers even focus specifically on one specific hardware support. So let's say NVIDIA. We have hardware nodes that are only CPU-only nodes. We even have Raspberry Pis that can act on a network. I'll even explain that. For example, NPN exit. So we have we support NVIDIA GPUs, AMD GPUs, and even Intel GPUs. That's how diverse our architecture is. And so we've built something so unique, and it's everything under one roof.
Right. So Tarik, is it a better, simpler way to saying you're trying to democratize computing, right? In one word, if I had to sum it up. But obviously,
make it easy.
It is complicated, as you say. Blockchain is complicated, and on top, if you build, more layers for providing creating application or providing solutions, I think it becomes even more complicated for people that are perhaps new to it. So there's so much I want to ask you, but let's simplify it. So anyone who's got a hardware can come into OctaSpace, right? GPUs, CPUs, even storage. I know storage is something you're looking at in the future. They can come, connect their nodes, be a node, and start providing their hardware to the sort of users who will come in, right? And this is sort of all powered by octatoken.
Correct.
The whole
effectively, yes. Yeah, the best analogy I would use is we become a peer-to-peer, where exactly. That's the best analogy I can use, because you have users who demand compute power, and you have people who have nodes with compute power, and we bring those two together. But our platform facilitates, easy to launch things, so we are the middleman effectively.
Yeah. But
obviously we facilitate all that. So things like, imagine we're the eBay or the Airbnb of computing, right?
Yeah, got it. And is it limited to just the GPU, CPUs, or you go a step further up, especially in the mining area, which obviously I'm very excited to discuss? Do you go a level up on ASICs miners also, or is this GPU limited?
It's currently only on real typical standard hardware nodes.
Standard.
So no ASICs can't be added as nodes on our network. On our renting network, just to be clear. Our blockchain, our proof of work consensus is being mined by ASICs. But the actual marketplace of computing is pretty much just typical standard hardware. Now, I'm not talking about standard hardware as you can obviously be very simple, or it could be data center level GPU stacks. So we support all those. Just ASICs are not currently supported.
Just ASICs are not supported, I think, out the way. So at this stage, we can't bring them onto the network quite yet. Perhaps in the future, something to consider. So currently you're sort of fighting on two battles, right? So you're fighting with the traditional with two players that are in rendering space. Let's use that example. And then there are obviously big players in the Web3 space, like Render Akash network, and a recent one, which is Bittensor, right? They all sort of have their uniquenesses, right? Like, for example, Render will be focused more on the rendering side, versus Bittensor is focused on the machine learning side, ML and artificial intelligence.
I mean, I would say Octa is an amalgamation of all those. So we do everything that Render can do. We do everything that Akash can do. We actually do even more than Akash can do. And we even do what Bittensor can do. I think obviously, there are most of them are more well known than we are, for various reasons. I think a lot of that often is, first to market. There's also always that aspect of people look at it as first to market, so there's a lot more hype, I think, around a lot of those. But as I've said it before, there are many that came first. MySpace came before Facebook. Doesn't mean they were the best, right? MySpace wasn't the best. So there's plenty of examples in that. And look, I think a testament to that is that our user base has grown massively in terms of adoption, how many people using our services. So, for example, and I know we didn't get into the specific services that we have, but, our rendering platform, for example, is being used by various VFX studios. And they're producing amazing content, for commercials, they've created works for even like Coca-Cola, with BMW, and that were all rendered on OctaSpace. So, we have a lot of users, and we're growing constantly. And it's the same with our compute marketplace as well, and that's growing in demand constantly, which is, I think, a testament to our commitment to our product and what we've really built.
The thing I love about Deepin, and especially the things you are mentioning, is that you actually have a real user, a real customer that's actually coming in to use the product. Because in crypto, you typically have this issue where you don't have the real customers, and you don't have the application that people can use in real world, right? It typically becomes the ecosystem within the crypto, and it stays within crypto. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not going to it's not touching real lives in real economy. So one of the things you also mentioned just before is OctaSpace is actually built on proof of work consensus mechanism. So why you guys chose to go the route of proof of work and a fair launch? Because most of the other protocols like Render, they were built on proof of stake, and I'm not aware of Akash, but why did you guys choose to go with proof of work and fair launch?
Well, that's a great question. I love this question, and I wish I got asked this question more often, to be honest. So look, first of all, focusing on why we went proof of work, primarily because it's the only, in my opinion, the only true way to ensure fair launch, right? Everything is on chain. You can see if it's pre-mined, you can see everything. And it's transparent for everyone. The first block on our blockchain was mined by a user. So there was no, not used by a miner. And that guy's still even in our Discord to this day. And that's something we're really proud of. Now, in terms of proof of why fair launch, this was something I've asked myself, actually, kind of in retrospect, is honestly, launching fair launch is one of the most difficult things you can do. And why that is, look, I looked at for example, tokenomics of Render. So tokenomics, for example, the foundation has 60% of the supply, just the foundation. Then on top of that, you have pre-sales, I think 10%. Then I can't remember, but I think, and it sounds crazy, but there's only around 30% kind of amongst users. And what message are you sending when you're controlling that vast amount of supply, that you can influence the market, you can influence what you're going to do, what trust does that build between you and your investors and users? And I think, when we go back to the roots of blockchain, fair launch, it's an ideological aspect. It's something that we've always fervently believed in. And that's why I often mention, we have a great relationship with Kaspa, because we see them as well as a fair launch. And it goes back to the original roots of blockchain. And I think that's, it is the most difficult decision that we made, because it has made our, when I say, when you start with nothing. You're basically out of pocket. You don't have any pre-allocation. You are, and everything. And I think that's important to put into context when you start to think that when we started with zero, we built everything with nothing. That shows our commitment to the project and to what we've made.
100%. We spend a lot of time within the Kaspa ecosystem. We believe in Kaspa because of those principles, right? Of proof of work, along with obviously, no sort of VC allocation upfront, no pre-minting, a lot of those things. So, and I think there are a lot of people like us that believe in this, right? Early Bitcoiners did too, right? They were the pioneers at that.
It's the root, as I said, it goes back to the roots of what crypto was all about, what blockchain was all about. Look, times have shifted a little bit. I'm a little, it's not great, but what I would say is, people aren't looking at white papers anymore, the tech or the tokenomics and things like that. And I keep, saying 5 years ago, people used to do research, real research. When you go into a project, you'll do research. You're not listening to a KOL or and just jumping into the next hype thing. Obviously, memes had their kind of role to play in a lot of that and things like that. And people were so used to kind of jumping around so quickly. But I still believe in the true purpose of blockchain and crypto. And why we went with crypto at the end of the day, because of the, it's decentralized. There's no main control, right?
Yeah. 100%. So, Tarik, why don't we actually jump, given you've already mentioned all the products you've built, so why don't we actually jump on the demo, straight into the demo, and go through different use cases from both the hardware provider, so node providers, and also from the customer point of view who are actually coming in to use these nodes. So let's cover off both of them.
So let's start with the marketplace right now. So with this, we have what's called a compute marketplace. And before I actually show these applications, what I will actually show is the compute rental. So in this page, we can actually see a various range of hardware. Now, and this is what I mentioned about the Airbnb. So imagine everyone is listing their own hardware here, just like you would be listing a house for rent. Here you are listing your hardware. And effectively setting your own price. You have your specifications. So, I have a 4090. The house has a pool. I have 63 gigabytes of RAM and so much disk space. Or the next is where it's located. We can see things like how often it's been rented. It's been rented 27 times. What the uptime is, etc., etc. But again, I stress people are here providing their own hardware, and they're setting their own price. And so it's up to you. Yeah, you can browse through this marketplace, or you can base it on your specification, filter it down. I mentioned to you, we have various hardware. We even have hardware with no GPUs. So let's say, for the sake of argument, somebody wants to mine something with a CPU. They can rent nodes here, which is CPU only, right? And you can use it to mine something that's CPU only. You don't need a GPU. So why bother, right? And it's 2 cents an hour. We have, as I said, even Raspberry Pis that can act as VPN exit nodes. But this is kind of the basics of the marketplace. And again, it depends what your requirements are. You can find even nodes with multiple GPUs here. Let's see, RTX A2000s, 5 pieces, and so on and so on. It all depends on your compute requirements.
I was going to ask, just on the marketplace, if you please go back to this one step back. I'm the hardware provider. I've got some hardware that it's lying around my house. I'm not using it. RTX 4060 as the example right here at the top one. I'm plugging into OctaSpace. I can see
Yes.
98.33% something at the top. It's a reliability score of some sort.
Correct. Yes. So that's a reliability score, and if you hover over it, it can show you metrics around. So here, for example, this node has been rented 59 times. It's had one failed rental. And you can even see average session duration. Yeah, so you can see, for example, average rentals for him would be 9 hours in length. So imagine, and then you had maximum session duration. One of the longest sessions was 14 days. So somebody had rented that node for 14 days, for example.
Oh, beautiful. I see. I can see it. And then the person has set up their own pricing, which is this 10 cents USD per hour.
You do have some additional pricing. Some nodes do have where people charge for example, traffic. You can see traffic's very cheap, but it's charged per gigabyte or storage. Right now, we don't actually charge for storage space. So that's something. It goes back to this decentralized storage solution that we're looking. That's a separate one.
Got it.
But
okay, cool.
So you can ignore the storage pricing right now, but yeah, you can see the granular details of what you're paying effectively. Obviously, it's paid in Octa. So, but this is what we do this equivalent of USD because it looks at the current price of Octa and it converts it to USD, so people can have a better representation of how much they're paying.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. Thank you. So now this is on the hardware provider side. So they are listing their hardware here. Now, I'm the VFX company. I want to come here. I want to use some of the services.
So the marketplace isn't for VFX users. That's the rendering platform, just to be clear. So
we see
there's different products. So even everyone can get confused. So the marketplace is specifically for other services. So things like you can use different AI tools. So I want to create images or AI videos. So you can generate using these tools. You can generate AI videos, or you can do AI image creation. You can even do voice syncing, voice cloning. You can do anything under the sun that practically you can do with AI. So we have a lot of various AI tools. Again, you can even have like AI chats, AI agents, where you can launch through these AI agents through anything LLM, for example. We have desktop and gaming as well. So we actually have a gaming implementation for remote streaming of gaming, and it's actually usually either in the Octa EGL desktop or Octa GLX desktop. And I could cover that just separately, but these are all various categories. You've got machine learning that you mentioned, even mining. So you've got different mining, as well as, for example, token farming, things like airdrops. So I don't know if some of you have heard of Jensen or things like Cusco, etc., etc. And we have something that pretty much almost no one has, and we've recently implemented, which is virtualization. And that's something that enables people to run our nodes, or not our nodes, people's nodes, as bare metal machines as well. And it's something so unique. Obviously, a lot of people who are more technical will understand that a lot. But yeah, so here you can pretty much launch pretty much anything. And even if it's not here, there are ways to launch your own as well. You can actually make your own apps. So here's I experimented. I created my own maps, and there's ways to do that in a separate location here called My Apps, for example.
There's so much there already, like the things you show. But let's pick one, which is the rendering part.
Okay, let's focus on the marketplace first, and we'll cover the rendering platform. But just before I do, just one thing that's also integrated in our marketplace is a VPN, because a lot of nodes are also provided as VPN nodes, so they might not be compute nodes. So this is where I mentioned to you, somebody might add a Raspberry Pi to our as a node. And that can act as a VPN, and people can click on Earth View here, and you can find different nodes across the world, and you can connect to them using different protocols. So you can see the different protocols we have here, and you can set up obviously VPN. A lot of our users from, for example, like China, other restricted countries like Iran use that to get past some of the country restrictions. But it's actually a very popular product, actually.
So how how do we pay for it? So if I want to use your VPN service, let's take an example of Proton VPN, which will charge me $7 USD, for example, a month. How much would I, as a user, how much would I end up paying for it using Octa token?
So ours is based on pay as you go. So all our services actually are based on pay as you go. So you don't pay. The way it works is you are charged by the minute as you rent.
I see.
Now, not but for VPN, it's literally charged by gigabyte. So let's say you set it up on your phone, and I often do. So, for example, I was in Turkey recently, and Discord is blocked over there. So I use the Octa VPN to connect to this. And so what I do is it's charged by how much data you waste, not by duration. So you could have a VPN active once and use only 2 gigabytes. So it all depends how much really data you use. But you can see it's pretty cheap. This one is, there's probably even cheaper nodes. Some are more expensive, some are cheaper. It all depends really. This one's pretty cheap. It's less than 0.09 octa per gigabytes is pennies.
Yeah, I think it makes so much logical sense the way you defined it, which is it's by the usage, not monthly.
Mhm.
But I think because we're so used to using the VPN based on duration, so typically all the VPNs will sell you based on month package or yearly package. How much would it be if you had to actually look at a typical use case of a user who's using 24/7 VPN and perhaps just the average data? Will it add up to the same number?
No,
or would it be more
cheaper. It's a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper. We've had users. We have a lot of users, and they share experiences. Like you mentioned, we have real users. There's actually plenty on Twitter who actually mention us and mention using our services. All of them, and some of them VPN users. I've seen some where they cancel their subscriptions and use Octa VPN, and they're like, I spent $2 in a whole month, or it's crazy. It's very, very cheap.
I see.
And there is a lot, and we're migrating. We did have an old platform for the VPN, and we're migrating a lot of those nodes. People are migrating those nodes here, and they're even cheaper than a lot of these. So. We do have an Android app. We also have a desktop app. You can actually launch these and use any of the nodes. So if you prefer not to use these protocols yourself, obviously you can download OpenVPN. Some people prefer to set. Basically here you can download the actual configuration files. And let's say you can add someone. On router level. So your whole house is covered by a VPN. But others, we do have ready to launch apps, so like a mobile app VPN. We do have that, so you can use that as well for the simple use.
I love it. I think I want to use myself. I want to give it a try after this session. But cool. So let's move on to the next part. I think we've covered a good bit on the VPN itself. You wanted to take us through the rendering bit?
Well, yeah, we can cover rendering. Okay. So this is our rendering platform called Octa Render. It's actually, so we have a separate website for it. So you can see here we have a dedicated rendering website for this, and you can actually click get started. I'm already signed in, so it's going to load up my own. If you imagine this is your own personal instance of your own render. And what this does is provides an unbelievable level of flexibility that's probably not available anywhere in the market right now. I need to probably share my whole screen. I just realized because I have to share, the example of how the rendering actually works. So let me do that now. So this is an example of, I don't know can you see Blender on my screen? And you can see
I can see Blender. Yeah.
I'm showing a 3D model, right? Animation here that's been created in Blender, which has 2 planets colliding. So you can see, and it's not much you can see, but it's a sequence from 0 to 250 frames here, and you can see as I move the slider, the animation, and obviously the aspect in terms of rendering is you create very heavy 3D assets. which have very high resolutions, and this is something that can't be done rendering on the fly. It's very different from games. Even games have pre-rendered assets. So effectively, what you're doing here is creating those assets, and now each one of these frames has to, it takes a lot of computing power to render. Now, you could theoretically, I'm on a laptop right now, so I could try and render it, but this would take me, I'm going to be honest, on this laptop, and it's got a 4090 actually in this, it would probably take me a couple of days to render this sequence. And what it would do is, lock up my PC for that couple of days. I wouldn't be able to do anything on it, and it would just render each frame in a sequential order, right? What we've done is, so we have, for example, direct integration into Blender. So you can see our Octa render here, Octa render add-on. We have an add-on, and I can, I'll call this job planets, and I can submit it to our render farm. It'll actually pack the file, and so it's packing now. And if we go back to the render farm, okay, and I can see it's currently submitting it. So we can see what I did earlier, but you can see it's uploading it. And what it does is, as well, it's done something really unique. Is because you can have massive files. We're talking hundreds of gigabytes. What we've done is we do a partial transfer where we do it in the segmentation kind of file approach. So it uploads parts of it. So if you start getting network dropouts, you don't have any issues. Okay, so we can now see it's automatically loaded my render here, and it's not rendering anything right. It's just showing, okay, I have 250 frames, etc., etc. So what I can do is, if you remember on that marketplace, you saw that hardware. Well, we can actually use that hardware to render this. So I'm going to use some nodes from across the world. So let's say Canada, we have Norway here, let's say UK, Slovakia, and let's say Ukraine. So now you can see what I've done is I can click multiple, and I can click rent. And what that will actually do is now trigger me to rent all those nodes at the same time in one go, and it will amalgamate them all into as one machine. So all these GPUs become a collective, and it's almost practically like I've got my own massive machine here with all those GPUs in my room. And it will render all the sequence, and you can see it's started to configure, and what it will do now is assign all those frames to those individual GPUs. And actually we can track it here, but once they actually activate, it will actually show them up here. So while we talk, we can actually watch it happen.
Right. I see. No, thank you. I think it makes sense, and I love the part where it was integrated with the Blender, and you just push a button, you actually push into Octa render, and then from there you can rent out the nodes that you needed, and you can choose based on the pricing. So I see the marketplace use case and how you connect now.
Yes.
And we can start to see the nodes starting to come online, right?
Yes, we can. So it's what it does is each node, once I rented all those nodes you saw, each node spins up a render client. So that's why it takes a little bit of time to spin up, because obviously, and that's all computer hardware that has to use, obviously. And, people often think associated that, with render, you need just GPU. It's all of the hardware that matters, actually, including the RAM and CPU, because there's a lot of compilation that happens, textures, etc., etc. All that plays a role in the overall rendering process. But yeah, we can see one node has appeared right now, and we can see it's already rendering. It's already rendered 3 frames, and it's doing it in a sequential order. Okay, so we can actually see 4 frames are being rendered right now, and that's probably because so the nodes are appeared. We can now see 7 GPUs, and we can see the breakdown. So this node has 1 GPU, this has 2, this has 1, and so on and so on. And we can see all the specifics, or we can see them as one. We can see the 7 GPUs.
It's beautiful. I love to see all the things happening in real time.
And you can see the rendering here. If I move this slider here, for the frames it's rendered already, you can see the video sequence is already ready to view. And it's how it's happening in real time. And, just put that into perspective, is that you have these nodes that are in Canada, Ukraine, all these different countries, literally across the globe. You imagine the amount of data that's being transferred and flying across. and they're all communicating with each other, and it's all working together to render this. I think that's really important to understand. This is what real decentralization is, and understanding how that works and how quickly this is being done. And this is why I said we've built something really, really unique that literally no one has.
It's just stunning. Like, I mean, I can see the use cases and why people would want to use it. How many nodes did you actually rent out? It was 7 nodes that is showing up there, right?
Yeah, I think yes. Well, we can see here how many sessions I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I actually have 5 nodes here. So I rented 5 nodes, but they have it's counting them as individual here. But if we look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's 7 GPUs because there's one here with 2 GPUs. There's a node here with 2 GPUs, for example, and that's, you can see another. I think we have another one with 2 GPUs. That's 2, 4, okay, 5, 6, 7, right? So 7 GPUs. So I break them down individually, but as I said, for the purposes of our platform, they're practically might as well be in the same row.
Yeah, exactly.
Regardless of the fact that they're located across the globe.
Yeah,
literally different things to do.
So
right?
have you done any analysis on how much time and cost saving you provide by having it distributed?
I mean, we're a lot more cost effective. Look, it's not. There's aspects here considering from a user perspective. It's not just cost. The cost does, of course, for many play a role, but it's not the be all and end all. Well, why I'm saying this is, look, a lot of users that use, for example, our rendering platform, they're VFX studios. They have deadlines to meet, and a lot of that comes down to, I want to render this fast. I don't have time, and I'll spend what I need to. But you've got to also take into account that pricing is subjective. It depends on what you rent. All right, I could rent here nodes, for 20 cents an hour. These are all our hourly rates, so, but you can see this render this will finish in less than an hour. It's going to finish in 5 minutes. If I want to finish it even sooner, I can just add more nodes to it. I'll add another machine here and so on and so on. So people can scale up. Obviously, it's subject to cost. So if you want to spend more, but I'll get it done faster, then I'll rent these 2 nodes and I'll add them to it, and it'll just distribute it and get it rendered even faster. So it's subjective, but even with that, we are still cheaper than mainstream providers. Look, since in terms of Web3, our direct competitors render just for the rendering platform itself. They control the pricing. So when you submit a render job, they determine how much it's going to cost you. You have no choice or no option on what hardware you're going to use, what's going to be rendered. So you don't know if it's going to be on a 4090 or 5090. Actually, they don't even support 5090s, FYI. Our platform does. You don't know what our hardware is allocated. You don't know anything. Here on ours, you have that flexibility. You decide what hardware you're going to use, and you decide the cost practically, right? And you know exactly what you're using and how fast it's going to be done. I can scale up, scale down. I mean, I won't get into the in-depth features. There's actually a lot more going on, because when you start going into rendering, and it's a world of its own. In terms of complexity, you have add-ons, you have VDBs, simulations, etc. And there's a lot. Building a rendering platform itself requires understanding of rendering pipelines. It's not a simple task to do. Obviously, I'm grateful for the wealth of knowledge that our team have to be able to build something like this. And again, outside the rendering platform, we have the compute marketplace. I mentioned even gaming. We have a games database. You can see games that are compatible with our platform, and this is crowd added. I don't want to say crowdfunded. People add their own reports, so you can log in, and then you can actually submit a report and say, okay, hey, I tested Cyberpunk on Octa and it works great. And actually, people have tested Cyberpunk and it does work great. So you can see we have an amazing range of services that and again, I keep saying, there is literally no one in this space that offers everything we do. If you recall, I mentioned to you, even in Web 2, there are providers that provide one specific centric service. we are so different. We are completely different in that regard.
So, Tarik, how many actually nodes are connected to your network now? So how many hardware providers are there?
These are just what's in the marketplace. This isn't anything in the blockchain. Let me see if I can get the number right now. There are currently 700 nodes connected.
Right. So these
700 nodes. Now, the one thing I do want to stress here, when people focus on numbers a lot, and numbers I know mean a lot, but they can also be misleading.
of course.
So our hardware nodes, obviously, I'll use for high, let's say, high requirements, or they have high requirements for depending on the use case that you need. And so you can see a lot of that, 4090s, 5090s. We even have server grade machines. And it really is imperative that our node providers provide quality hardware, not quantity. I don't need a bunch of our GTX 1080s. I don't need GTX 1060s, and I've seen many providers with thousands of GPUs, but they're all rubbish. I mean, what use do I have from those, right? As a user, I can't run any AI jobs or anything like that. So we do have a requirements document for when you want to provide a node, depending on the services you want to provide. So there are specific requirements that you need to have, even for rendering. For example, for rendering, you need to have a node that scales the RAM with how many GPUs and VRAM you have. So, for example, if you had just one RTX 4090, it has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. You must have at least a minimum of 48 gigabytes of RAM. If you have two RTX 4090s in one node, you have to double that RAM. And it has to continuously double. And so that's why I said our requirements are pretty specific because of the nature of our platform. And use cases.
Nature of the use cases, I was going to say, the type of customers that are getting attracted to coming to the platform for specific use cases. Just perhaps moving on, I think so far has been amazing to see the platform, amazing to see the rendering itself and renting parts of the platform, how you can rent out almost any nodes available globally. That's fascinating. Just moving on to the next part, one of the things you mentioned that you'll reach a max supply by 2027 for Octa token, right? So you're sort of thinking you have your plans in place specific to Kaspa, right?
I mean, look, I mentioned a few times, I name dropped Kaspa a few times in this session. And I mentioned it because, Kaspa's, we really appreciate the great tech, their fair launch. Obviously, we're fans of BlockDiag and everything that these guys are doing. It sounds really, really exciting. And we've done a lot of deep diving into it as well. Now, one of the things we've started to look at is obviously, I mentioned around getting users, and we found, a new opportunity, I think, from looking at the crypto side of things. Always payments are always an interesting dilemma. Decentralization, crypto payments, etc. And obviously, with the growth of users, you always need to diversify. And one of the things we looked at was what alternative could we provide? And we came up with Kaspa, and why Kaspa? Question, why Kaspa? Kaspa was because of speed. The speed is one key aspect. Low fees, second aspect. And third, Kaspa is currently obtainable pretty much everywhere. So you can buy that on Kraken, you can buy it anywhere, right? And Octa is listed on much fewer exchanges, realistically. Kaspa isn't. And it's also a fantastic gateway, I think. And on kind of the final point, I think it gives us an additional audience that we can attract, use some of our services, right? And look, I have a massive appreciation for the Kaspa community. I generally do. As I said, we also like the fact they're a fair launch, but I love the passion of the Kaspa community. And I also want to give something back to them because, also as an additional utility for Kaspa. What actually sparked that idea was I did see a tool on Kaspa that was a messaging app. And I don't know if you've come across it, but there was
messaging app. Kassia messaging,
Yes. and that I recall seeing that, and I thought, I mean, it's great. I love it, and kudos to the guy who made it, or to the guys who made it. But I thought, imagine if we could bring all this computing power, this would be a special level of utility for Kaspa, right? And that doesn't mean it would impact the utility of Octa by any means, any stretch of the means, but it's an alternative. It offers an alternative. You can pay in Kaspa, you can pay in Octa. That's the difference, right? And you have an alternative. Same as, right, think about it this way. You can pay in USDT or you can pay in USDC.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. It doesn't diminish one or the other. It doesn't diminish it.
So
it
exists. So Tarik, this is the first part of enabling Kaspa payments, right? So that's the first part of the sort of discussion we had prior to recording. So the node providers and the customer both.
We're not thinking, we're working on. We're already working on it.
Awesome. So that's an alpha here, right? So that'll be for both sides, so node providers and for customers to being able to pay and receive in Kaspa potentially.
Well, it's not simple. I'm going to be honest. So there's a lot of work entailed in this, and we are working. I've already reached out to some of the Kaspa team and about how, because we're going to have to kind of sync on this a little bit. So we've started working together. We're going to have to set up our own RPC as well for Kaspa, and so there's a lot. So let's but look, in certain respects, we're also going to we take a certain amount of fees from services, right? I mentioned to you the peer-to-peer, but when people rent, there is a small amount of fee that goes to us, and we also want to use Kaspa as also an element that we can build a treasury on. So I think and it would be as I mentioned before, I see it as a store of value. I think it would be great to build a treasury of Kaspa, and we're a treasury of Octa, and we can continue, building on top of that. In terms of the actual technical implementation, that's being worked on by the tech guys.
So you're working on.
I'm not the tech guy. I'm not the tech guy. I can show you what they, the builds. I give ideas. I give direction in terms of what I think the product should, be developed with. They realize those ideas, right? And they realize that I'm a product manager. It's what I have done practically, all my entire business career. I used to be a project manager and a product manager. So I manage delivery and concepts, right? But I don't realize that. I leave that to the tech guys. So I do often sometimes provide tech support if there's something I can address. Otherwise, I have to kind of lean on the guys and say, "Hey, guys, can you help here? Because I have no idea what this means." Yeah. So just to get it clear, not everyone's a dev, right? And not everyone's a dev.
No, but I'm excited. But I'm excited. Like, even if it's something you guys are working on and it still needs to be fleshed out to bring at least the payment side of things first onto Kaspa as an alternate option, second option, right, outside of Octa. I think it'll be great for the community to start using it, right? And obviously for you guys to build a treasury and for the node providers to receive an alternate coin, right? That they might see value in. So that's the first one. The second one, which I think got me intrigued, was the part where you actually have a supply of the mineable coins will run out by 2027 of Octa coins, right?
And we reach max supply at that point. And this is what we discussed. We are looking at. Obviously, we are already starting to address options that we need to put on the table about what we can do, because ultimately we have utility needs. It's not just an investment coin. So you need to understand and consider how is Octa going to be supplied? How is it going to be resourced to pay for services? Aside from Kaspa, the side, you're still going to need utility of Octa. And there's many areas that, that has to be retained. And so when all the max supply is in the hands of community, in the hands of users, that's going to be what's out there flowing. And now you start to think, okay, what do we do at that point? Do we switch to a different consensus model? Do we say, okay, proof of stake? I'm not a fan. Proof of work for me, again, goes back to what I was saying earlier. Proof of work for me has always been something that I've fervently believed in, and it goes back to its roots. but looking at other chains, if you're going to migrate to another chain, for example, Ethereum has a ridiculous gas fee. So you imagine you're a user, you want to buy some Octa tokens to spend on the platform, right? And imagine there are tokens on the ETH blockchain. What do you have? You don't just buy the tokens. You also pay an ETH gas fee. And who wants to do that? Because it's an unpredictable element. I've seen cases where you're trying to buy a token, and look, I've traded in the past, and you try to buy a token, and the gas fee is more than the actual tokens you're buying, right? I'm sure everyone's experienced that, and you go, it's not a viable solution, and that's why I often see, and I'm often critical of when I see projects under the category DeepIn being promoted and that are launched as tokens on ETHchain. And I keep saying, those guys have no users. I question whether they even have tech then. Because why would you build something? Why would somebody pay an unknown amount? Look, when you go to a shop, you want to see what you're going to pay. Not, oh, by the way, there's an extra hidden fee, but you'll find out what it is at the checkout, right? That's not what traditional users want. So I think one of the solutions potentially is Kaspa blockchain, but there are a lot of things that need to be in place that would, put that as, but it's a consideration. It's a consideration that, we've added to our list. But as I said, I think we're obviously waiting to see how things like smart contracts will develop on Kaspa. Before we can even kind of make, final say. And we haven't made any major decisions. Again, this is currently what it's a consideration. But, going back to, we've also purchased a KMS domain for Kaspa, which is going to be the wallet for our treasury, OctaSpace.
Beautiful.
So, and it was made on my birthday as well. So that's a domain, but we purchased it yesterday.
Beautiful. So Octa token can come on the layer 2 on top of obviously Kaspa through, Igra Labs or Casplex, whatever you choose to opt into as one of the dApps. Man, I can see a lot of value there for you guys, but also for Kaspa community. But obviously a lot of work has to be done before then.
Yes. And as I said, this is just a consideration at the point, there's a lot of technical feasibility to be analyzed. Like I said, right now we have started some of the analysis on options on the table. Look, we might find a way to retain proof of work and be a green proof of work. Again, a lot of options are up in the air, but Kaspa did come up as one kind of solution. And as I said, you could obviously tell I'm a bit of a fan as well of Kaspa.
Yeah, of course.
For many reasons, and there's a lot of synergy there. I said, I have a great relationship with some of the Kaspa team, so I love working with this guys.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Of course, it's good for us to discuss this. That's why we love talking to builders, because plans change, and we all understand that. But at least it's a consideration. So Tarik, why don't we wrap this up on any closing thoughts you have for us, for the community, or for the listeners?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for setting aside some time to get me on your podcast. I think it's been great. It's been a great conversation. Obviously, in terms of if you guys want to access, reach out to us on Telegram or Discord, ask us any questions. We engage a lot with our community. It's something I've always felt that it's important that you be as transparent as possible. We are as transparent as can be. You can look at our Block Explorer, you can see everything. Okay. But again, you can talk to us. You can ask us any questions, any burning questions you have. Nothing's taboo. We're always looking at our options or what we can do for the community. And we have actually we did make an exciting announcement yesterday. We've started another. We also have a partnership with Zebek. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but they are effective. They have a payment provider based on what they do, financial payroll, etc. They're pretty big. They're based in the UK and US. And actually, there's going to be you're going to be able to pay with Octa using Mastercards. So Octa's going to be integrated into actual Mastercards. But they are also going to be looking at leveraging our network of nodes for their payment services. So that's pretty cool. So there's a lot of technical integration as well there. So imagine how this network of nodes can be used to process data for financial services. It's pretty amazing.